Hi, everyone, and welcome to my second podcast episode. Today is a little bit of an impromptu episode. I have already recorded the second one, and we were going to be stripping back wellness, looking at starting a wellness journey, basically taking wellness back to basics. And I was going to post it, and then I realized today is International Yoga Day. And obviously, for me being a yoga teacher, it's quite a big deal, it's very important for me. And I was like, no, I'm going to have to let this podcast episode wait and let's dive in and do this one today. I am very blessed and I have a lot to be thankful for, especially at the moment. It was the summer solstice yesterday, and I had a lovely evening celebrating that. I went to the beach with one of my good friends. We set some intentions. It was so lovely. Summer solstice is always nice. The days are getting longer, the sun is out more. Yeah, I love summer. I'm a summery person. My grandparents have just got married as well, so that was really lovely too. My sister has just graduated or finished uni and she's got a 2-1. So I'm a very proud big sister. And my other sister, who I'm also very proud of, has just finished her GCSEs. So going on in my family, there is a lot to be grateful for, a lot to be thankful for. But yoga for me and celebrating International Yoga Day, yoga is something that I am grateful and thankful for and feel like celebrating. So this is my way of bringing that celebration of today. So I thought in this episode, we'll have a little look at what yoga is. I think a lot of people get a bit of a misunderstanding of what yoga is. I think a lot of people just think it's, just movement and just a bit of stretching here and there, which it isn't. It goes so much deeper than that. So I thought maybe we could go over that a little bit, my journey of how I got into yoga. And yeah, just some little things like that. This episode hasn't been, I normally sit and write kind of like a few notes down. I haven't done that. So goodness knows what we're going to end up with. But let's celebrate International Yoga Day and I'll see you on the other side. Hi, my name is Meg, and you are listening to the Wellness Musings with Meg podcast. I am a fully qualified beautician and yoga teacher who has studied and worked in health and wellness since 2017. I have been obsessed with wellness my entire life and have always wanted to share my passions more. If you love health, wellness, and yoga and want to learn more, this podcast is for you. I will be bringing you all things wellness from diet and lifestyle to beauty tips and tricks, and of course, yoga as well. So grab yourself a green tea and find a tranquil spot, and let's jump in. So my yoga journey, I didn't actively go looking for yoga. Yoga kind of came to me in every aspect, through every part, everything kind of just came to me, which is really lovely. Yeah, I definitely went into yoga for the wrong reasons, which I'll go into. I was very naive. Um, but yeah, I started off when I was younger. I wanted to be a dancer or a dance teacher, and I was dancing, and I was also a synchronized swimmer. So I definitely was someone who enjoyed doing more of the creative sports side rather than your typical, long jump, javelin. That was not me at all. But synchronized swimming and dancing, oh, I loved it. I did it every single night. I was either dancing or synchronized swimming. I absolutely loved doing both. And like I said, I wanted to be a dance teacher and set up my own dance school. And my dance teacher was pretty brutal, but in hindsight, I'm really glad that she was. And she basically said to be a really well respected dance teacher, whether this has changed or not, I don't know, but to be a really well respected dance teacher and to have a really good dance school, you have to have really been a professional dancer yourself. And my toes don't point perfectly. So I do not have a perfect point, and I was kind of dancing more doing in like ballet and acrobatics. They were what I really enjoyed and really wanted to go into. And she was like, look, you're not, a big girl trying to make a difference in the dancing world. The fundamental thing that you need to be able to do is point your toes. and do it like have a perfect point, and you don't have that. And it's because I've got little issues with my knees and my feet, which funnily enough yoga has really helped and probably almost fixed, which, you know, again, hindsight's a funny thing. But everything happens for a reason. I'm a big believer in that. And as I got older, I sort of dropped the dancing a little bit, and dropped the synchronized swimming. And then when I got into my teens, I sort of fell out of sport completely. And yeah, and when I say I got into yoga for the wrong reasons, when I was younger, I used to watch things like Big Bang Theory, and the character Penny on there, she was, you know, she was saying, oh, you know, I go to yoga. And kind of everyone, on every celebrity that I was sort of watching or wanted to be like, did some sort of, they, you know, they did yoga. You know, yoga was the thing to do. So I got in it definitely for the wrong reasons. I got in it to for like the vanity of like, oh yeah, I do yoga, oh look at me, I'm a yoga girl. Definitely not the right reasons to be getting in. And I definitely started off as well with the wrong classes. So I basically went to classes. I actually said this in my last podcast episode, but the classes I started going to were definitely not designed for someone like me. They were very relaxing, pretty on the easier side, and very like, now I know what I know, but two-dimensional. It was all just, you know, physical based. And yeah, the demographic was more like mums with children, people who maybe have health conditions so can't do anything too extreme, people who wanted to do more of like an easy, relaxing, more of like a calming the mind session. um, and that for me wasn't enough. And I do think in hindsight that my teacher probably wasn't the best, in that if I have someone come to my classes now and I don't, you know, and if they come to me at the end and they're like, oh my gosh, that was, you know, so difficult, I'm not sure if it was for me, I'm like, fine, no problems at all. You know, I specialize and teach in vinyasa more than anything else. So vinyasa can be a really, really challenging class and a really challenging thing to get into. And I'm like, that's fine, you know, that's no problem at all. You'd be better off maybe trying yin yoga, or, you know, trying a different teacher. And that is what my teacher should have done back then. She should have been like, look, you've got a dancing background, you're pretty flexible, you're pretty strong. This might not be the best place for you, but maybe have a look at vinyasa, ashtanga yoga, things like that. And that would have helped me along a lot more. So I do think that's an important thing for people, regardless of where you are in your yoga journey, to take on board, is that if you go to a class, they're not all exactly the same. I mean, no teacher is the same, but also there's so many different types of asana yoga, so physical yoga. There are so many different types that just because you go to one class, don't write off yoga completely, because it might be the teacher, it might be what type of yoga you're doing. Keep trying, keep going, and try different classes until you find the right one. Because I could probably bet my life savings that there is a yoga class out there for every single person on the planet. There will be something for everybody. So yeah, I think, and now I know what I know, I probably should have, yeah. And I got bored. I got bored very quickly because I wasn't being challenged. And I think my teacher, I don't know, I didn't gel with her so much. And yeah, I just fell out of it. COVID then came along, and I was sort of trying to get into yoga a little bit. So I was doing the odd stretch here and there. I think because I didn't know what yoga really was. And from having a dancing background, I was very confused as to what the difference between yoga and dancing was, because I was like, well, you know, in the beginning of my dance classes, I stretch. So is that not yoga? And then I'd be like, well, so technically, am I doing yoga if I'm stretching in the garden? So that was kind of what my mindset was when I was during COVID, when we were all in lockdown. So I was stretching a lot and I was very active. I was really into the gym at the time as well. But I think for me, I thought that just stopping and having a little stretch at the end of my gym session, I was like, yeah, that's yoga, which it isn't really. Now I know everything that I know. Um, well, yeah. So after COVID, I was at the time I was working in a spa within a hotel, and there was rumors of a new yoga teacher starting in the gym department, and everyone was a bit like, oh, I don't know if actually at this time I have missed a step. I have missed a big part actually. So before that, my aunt was with a guy who was a taekwondo teacher and had a dojang. So for those who don't know what a dojang is, it's basically a studio but for taekwondo. And my aunt, she was doing the taekwondo and she trained to be a yoga teacher to help with the flexibility of the students. So not only were they bringing those taekwondo classes, but they were also bringing those yoga classes as well. Again, I think the yoga that was being taught wasn't necessarily proper yoga, but I have nothing against that. They're a dojang, they're taekwondo based, they're not a yoga studio. So people aren't necessarily coming to learn yoga properly. Um, so yeah, my aunt trained to do that, but she works in the NHS, extremely busy job. And she said to me, look, I can't do all of the lessons. Why don't you train to become a yoga teacher? And then, because you've always been interested in it, and, would you like to do it? And we'll go, you can teach a couple of classes. So I think because I had quite a boho beauty, like I was working in a spa at the time. Yeah, and I was like, yeah, why not? Let's go for it. I'd kind of always wanted to train to be a yoga teacher, but again, like, didn't really know what yoga was. I feel like I did everything very backwards and forwards, backwards, inside out, topsy turvy. I didn't do like the conventional, I want to be a yoga teacher, I'm going to do a 300-hour course. No, 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 no. That wasn't me at all. Um, so yeah, she said, why don't you train to be a yoga teacher? And instead of doing a 300-hour course, because they were quite expensive and I wasn't earning masses of money back then, I did a 30-hour gravity yoga course, which, yeah, it was a good course. It taught me some of the basic stretches. Um, it was a good course in that it kind of got me started. It got me the certificate, it was good in that respect. And the teacher was brilliant actually. I think if I'd gone into that certification knowing more, I would have got a heck of a lot more out of it, and it would have been a really nice thing to embellish onto a 300-hour or a proper teaching certificate. But that wasn't how I did it, because it's me and I do everything awkwardly. So I trained this 30-hour course, got my certificate, and then I started teaching in the dojang, just doing like one night a week. It was super basic. Gravity yoga was or is extremely similar to like yin yoga, in that you'll hold a stretch for about 5 minutes, 2 to 5 minutes, and you kind of meditate in each of those stretches. So you're holding it about 50 to 70%, and you hold that stretch for 2 to 5 minutes, coming out when you need to, and then you'll go on to the next stretch and the next one. So it's very gravity yoga is extremely flexibility based, almost no strength work at all. I think yin yoga differs because, for example, if you're going to hold a warrior two pose for 5 minutes, that is going to burn. That is going to be a real challenge. Whereas there wasn't any challenging postures in gravity yoga. It was all not challenging in a strength sense. It was all challenging in a flexibility based sense. And this is really good for someone who doesn't have any flexibility at all and is starting their journey out. Because I always give the analogy of, like, if you have two people that slip on ice and you've got someone who stretches and someone who doesn't, we all fall, we all slip. I think every single person who has ever been in an icy place has slipped on ice. It happens all the time. If you're someone who doesn't stretch and you slip on ice, you could really, really hurt yourself in that, let's say you slip into a split position. So you slip, your legs go, you could like tear a hamstring, you could do some serious damage if you don't stretch at all. That is going to seriously cause some issues. But if you do stretch, and you might not even be able to get into a split, But if you stretch and you slip into a split, I feel like this is such a tongue twister, this analogy. Um, because your muscles are used to that stretch and they've got that in them, yeah, you might pull a muscle. Yeah, it's probably going to be a bit uncomfortable if you can't get into a split, but you aren't going to end up tearing, completely wrecking that muscle and causing yourself a lot of damage that could take a really long time to heal. So gravity yoga, I found, definitely had its place. My beginning classes were really basic as well. Literally just friends and family turned up. I think I would very rarely get more than maybe 5 people show up. So they were tiny classes, but it set that groundwork in for me. It made me feel really comfortable teaching, the growth perspective as well. So it was nice to watch people kind of start off, and then the more they came to my classes, I could see that difference. They could see that difference in their flexibility. So that was always really good, and that was reassuring for me anyway. Then after that is when we had a new yoga teacher starting in our hotel that I was working in. And yes, like I said, everyone was like, oh, what's she like? Is she good? Blah, blah, blah. And I was like, very arrogant, I think, now I know what I know again. I think I was a bit arrogant, and I was like, well, I'm a trained yoga teacher. Why don't I go and see what she's like? Which I find hilarious looking back now, because my knowledge of yoga was so tiny. And I went to this class and oh my God, like my mind was blown. So my teacher taught me vinyasa, which is flowing. So you've got a sequence of movements or sequence of yoga poses that flow one to the other, to the other, to the other. And you have transitions as you flow through. Oh my goodness, like the strength work was there, the challenge was there, the challenge in the mind was there, the breath work was there. My teacher is an extremely incredible teacher. Not only is she incredibly talented herself when it comes to asana yoga, her Instagrams, her just her asana practices are stunningly beautiful, but she's also got the other element, and she's got a way of teaching where you get that element of the philosophy side of yoga, but it's not too much. She's just a very good teacher, and I suddenly realized, oh my God, I'm yoga can be difficult. Yoga can be a challenge. I mean, now I'm like, Fedoy, yeah, obviously. But yoga can be such a challenge. And I mean, that's how I then got into vinyasa. So I fell in love with her classes. I ended up going like 2-3 times a week. The only reason I stopped going to her classes because I moved so far away, which was absolutely gutting. And I still to this day miss them so much. And yeah, I fell in love with it. So that's how yoga found me in that respect, is that it was waiting, but I just wasn't with the right teacher, the right classes. And as time went on, I then started getting a little bit more comfortable with teaching vinyasa myself. So I'd start creating sequences, and I'd start kind of challenging my little tiny class, and just starting to do it a little bit here and there. Started out with teaching them sun salutation A, and so salute to the sun, and then from there going on a little bit more and getting a little bit more advanced and just kind of enjoying the ride. So that for me was how I got into teaching yoga, the physical side of yoga. And then one day I was traveling, because I still work one day a week, an hour and 20 minutes away from where I live. So I often stick on a podcast and just have a little listen. And I was like, you know what? I want to learn more about yoga. And at that point, I still just thought that yoga was physical. I just thought that yoga was stretching. And it was like 2-dimensional, and there's not really much more to it. Listen to this podcast. And if you're ever interested in the philosophy of yoga, the podcast I absolutely like, the holy grail of podcasts, I think, when it comes to yoga philosophy, is Let's Talk Yoga, and it's on Spotify. Fantastic, fantastic. And I drove and listened to this podcast, and my mind was blown. I was like, oh my God, asana, so physical yoga, is one tiny bit, one tiny little aspect. You've got pranayama, you've got breathing techniques, and then you've got meditations, you've got different levels of meditations, different ways of meditating. It is absolutely incredible. You've got ways to help you with living, and self-reflections, ways that you help to grow yourself, ways that how you can take on the world around you. The philosophy side of yoga is fascinating, and the 8 limbs of yoga. So this is where we're going to be getting in a little bit. If you've never heard of yoga before or don't know anything about this, Patanjali was a yogi many years ago who created what we call the 7 limbs of yoga, which are a set of different aspects of yoga. So, like I said, you've got your beginning ones, you've got your yamas and niyamas, which are how you approach things in the world and how you change yourself. You've got your asana, you've got pranayama, which is breathing, and then you've got levels of meditation. So you've got kind of an easier one. You've got meditating in so you'll just be like staring at something, for example, and all your attention is focused on that, and all the way up to I think it's called Dharma off the top of my head. That's really bad that I can't remember, but it's basically finding enlightenment. Yoga is not a religion, though. I will say that yoga works very well with religion. It crosses over a lot with like different religious texts, in that the things like not hurting people, being kind, um, like this. I'm trying to think of examples here, but especially your yamas and niyamas, they follow very close suit to like Christian 10 commandments, for example, and things like that. So yoga is not a religion, but you can bring it into religion, and it does follow some things that religion follows. I think because yoga gives you a set of guidelines to make you a better person, when you start going into the philosophy side of it, they often those guidelines are very similar to like what a lot of religious texts will kind of give you in commandments. So yeah, yoga is not a religion, but that is how yoga is so beneficial, is that you're not just moving your body. One quote, I can't remember who the quote was from, but one quote I really loved is that yoga is the elimination of suffering in the mind, the body, and the spirit. So the idea behind yoga is to be at like peak, peak health and peak wellness in the mind, the body, and the spirit. And if you listen to my podcast yesterday, actually, I might not put that in that one. That might be in the one for tomorrow. Oh, there we go. There we go. A little sneak peek into tomorrow's podcast. But yeah, I talk about wellness in tomorrow's podcast, and we talk about the mind, the body, and the spirit, and how those are your kind of 3 aspects to a person in to find peak wellness, or that is in holistic wellness anyway. I'll go over that more in my next podcast. But yeah, it's interesting how yoga, if you follow yoga properly and you follow the 8 limbs, it is interesting how you end up kind of, yeah, if you can follow yoga properly, you're going to be in a really good place when it comes to wellness. Yeah, like I said, I've not written any notes down for this. So where are we? My yoga journey, what yoga is, we've definitely covered that. And why you should do yoga. Why should you do yoga? Maybe that should be, yeah. Why should you do yoga? Because, oh my goodness, for a million reasons, that's why you should do yoga. Yoga is just, it makes you take on so many different aspects of yourself and question a lot of things. You start getting, if you do start going into the philosophy side, it really does make you it makes you face things about yourself that you might not necessarily want to face. You start seeing parts of yourself that you might not necessarily want to admit are there, personality traits, things like that. But they make you take that head on, face your fears, kind of thing, and they do make you a better person. It 100%, yeah. I've never been stronger physically or mentally than since I've done yoga, and it is a journey, 100%. But yoga is, I think, the best journey ever. Like, you'll never stop ever learning. There's a reason that yoga is thousands of years old, and it's because people start a yoga journey and they get hooked on it and they realize how amazing and incredible it is and how much of a difference it can make in their life. So if you're someone who is thinking about doing yoga, or you're someone who is maybe pondering a little bit, just go for it. Just do it. You know, it's never, ever, ever too late to start a yoga journey. I get some people come to me and they're like, "Oh, well, I'm 70, so I'm way past doing yoga." I laugh. No, that's ridiculous. That is so crazy. Anyone at any point in their life can do yoga, because you don't necessarily have to do the physical side. Like, there have been yogis, and there was a yogi who had no arms and no legs, but yet still practiced yoga. So that just goes to show that yoga is not totally physical. Yoga is in the mind. Yoga is mostly in the mind. The physical part is such a tiny part, but I think the Western world focuses and emphasizes on that more, because we have definitely lost touch. And we're getting there. Meditation is becoming more of a trendy thing. It's becoming more of a talked of thing, but we've definitely lost touch with that side, that meditation, that grounding, that back to nature side. Yeah, I think that's everything I want to say about yoga. I hope you enjoyed this episode, this impromptu episode. And yes, the next one is all about wellness. And like I said in the beginning, stripping it back, going back to basics. I will probably call it, and because I've already edited and finished recording it, I'll probably say episode 2 for that one, but it's not episode 2. This is episode 2. Yeah, so enjoy my next little podcast episode. I hope you enjoyed this one. I'm on Spotify and YouTube, so wherever you're listening, please subscribe, please follow, please like. It means so, so much to me when you do. And I look forward to having a chat with you again soon. Thanks. Bye.